This is where all the handsome, intelligent people are staying. I'm delighted to say that USmartThink have been members of MEI for over a year now. We've got a great respect for what they do in terms of lowering the carbon footprint of major events. So it seemed very appropriate to invite Chris to be the moderator of this panel, focusing on the broad range of sort of legacy, not just environmental, but social and governance. So over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Andy. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I think the mics are all fine. So I'll do another round of introductions in just a tick. My name is Chris Thompson, as Andy said, from USmartThink. We are the leading travel demand management platform for major events. Very quickly, this summer, we deployed our travel assistance service for the Commonwealth Games, providing over 250,000 people with a personalised low-carbon travel plan. Over 70% of those people opted to use public transport to get to the Games. Just under 10% just chose to walk or cycle. And less than 17% opted to drive. Now, that 17%, however, that opted to drive generated 1,315 tonnes of CO2 equivalent emissions, which is around 35% of the Commonwealth Games' overall carbon footprint. So whilst we help to deliver one of the most sustainable major events the UK has ever seen, there's clearly a huge amount to do, still to do, in respect of driving towards carbon neutral, if you'll pardon the pun, and even possibly, beyond that to carbon negativity. Environmental, social and corporate governance can help us manage critical externalities, such as the disproportionate carbon footprint caused by visitor travel. But whilst ESG is business critical, is it really business critical, and is it high enough on the agendas of the organisations and stakeholders supporting major events? And where should the focus be in terms of ESG? Should it perhaps be more on the social side than the environmental? Maybe there's a virtuous circle there by focusing on that. So with that brief introduction, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce our panel of experts today. So we have Pippa Ganderton, who's Product Director at ATPI Halo. Graham Dames, Business Development Director at Sunbelt Rentals. I did get told off for getting names wrong earlier, and it turned out to be the company name. Apologies, Graham. And Richard Bate, Chief Safety and Sustainability Officer for the e-Bike Grand Prix and part of Cube International. So we had a great little chat, a great little Teams call earlier in the week. Since then, we've created an extremely long email chain that you're all very welcome to join, and I'm sure we'll get into some of the points on there as we go forward. I would like you to start, if it's okay, by just giving a brief summary of your organisation and perhaps telling us what you think the biggest challenge is in respect of ESG. Perhaps ladies first. Pippa, would you mind going first?
Working, yes. So ATPI is a travel management company. We specialize in travel and have a specific arm which is related to travel and sports-related and events-related travel. Halo is our latest addition, which helps clients with the client-facing support to help reduce their carbon footprint and to plan events better and more sustainably. Biggest challenge, I would say, is that clients realize, or that clients understanding that they need to change the way that they're working, and that will change the budgets that they're planning. And I think also in line with that, there is a budgetary impact, but also that you need to look at not just one area of sustainability, but environmental, social and governance do go together. As in also the way I portray it to our clients as well, measuring, reducing and eventually offsetting the carbon footprint. So those are the focus areas for me and the challenges I face when talking with clients.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much, Pippa. So workplace management, managing and mitigating impacts. Graham, perhaps I could pass the same question over to you.
Yeah, sure. Great to be here, by the way. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I think just a quick overview of Sunbelt Rentals. We are an international equipment rental and service provider. Sunbelt Rentals is the trading name of Ashtead Group, which is a FTSE 100 company. We have over 20,000 employees across the group. Within the UK, that actually is 4,000 staff within the group. We focus very broadly on all sectors of support in terms of the circular economy, in terms of rental, of course, which is obviously very complementary to that. In relation to the topic of discussion today, we do actually have a very strong focus, and we believe we lead in relation to ESG. We have an action plan which is called Our Planet, and that is actually a plan that focuses all to reduce carbon and actually increase sustainability output. Our focus, I reflect upon this because it's quite a statement, but we are here to transform the lives of people we interact with around this very subject, and whether that's to do with our colleagues internally, whether that's to do with our customers or indeed the communities we work in, and also through climate and positive change and less impact through what we do. We're actually also going to look after and transform the lives of the next generation. So it's a very, very visionary view that we take in relation to, you know, what our objectives are in the space, as well as what we do as we continue to evolve as a business. And very quickly, within the space of sustainability, the group in the UK, within the last 18 months alone, we've invested over £100 million on sustainable equipment. And in fact, we did place the largest order to JCB from a British company for 65 million, and that was actually for plant equipment in the main, but that actually covered 90% of that was either either stage 5 equipment, hybrid equipment, electric, or indeed solar products. And our capability around the rental piece is the overall event infrastructure requirements that a customer might have, whether that's survey equipment, trackway services, fencing, cabins, lighting, traffic management. It's very, very broad in what we do. And we do have that capability also to add greater value in terms of looking at the overall solution from a design perspective as a first point call, from defining that actual solution through to design, and then delivering that solution as a turnkey supply, should indeed a customer want us to do that. So our view, I think, around the ESG and what this is about, I think that's absolutely critical. I think everybody's got to get on that journey. We've got no option, and hopefully from where we're sitting, we are leading the way. Would have been one of my reflections.
Thank you very much, Graham. And we'll talk more about that transformational effect that you guys are having, and I think probably, you know, again, stakeholder engagement seems to be the biggest challenge that you're addressing quite effectively. Richard, I know you have a wonderful, deep history in events management and a very people-first approach throughout your career. Could you tell us a little bit about e-bike, possibly touching on your past, but and also the biggest challenge in terms of ESG?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The first thing I want to say is, first of all, Graham, can I have your budget? 100 million, that's pretty spectacular. Yeah, I work for e-bike Grand Prix, the smallest part of the Cube International group. I joined Cube International 6 months ago after 8 years with Formula E. And prior to Formula E, I'd worked with MHI Vestas on their offshore renewable projects. But my history in the events industry goes back to 1982, as we were chatting about earlier. I did the World Canoe Championships in North Wales, so I've been around the industry for a little while. So why did I move from Formula E to Cube International? Well, it's just a really exciting business. Two sides to the business. We've got the event side, which I lean into, which has modular event management, and now I see that we have a sound and light team or a sound and light department within that. And then you've got the other side of the business, which is licensing, merchandising, e-commerce, and partnerships. What makes us unique is that we do both things. It's very rare that you find. I don't think there is another company that does both things. And you know, working in and around Andy Moss, It's never going to be boring. So, my history, I think, yes, we've established it goes back 40 years, but I am very, very people-centered, and that's probably because I started my life as a paramedic in the NHS many, many years ago. So I'm very much driven by social welfare, the needs of people, and engaging with our workforce, and understanding, particularly when you work internationally, the benefits that a big organization like Cube can have on our local workforce, our local communities. So the whole sustainability ESG piece fits kind of really well in with my, the way I've lived my life for the past 30 years. What are the challenges within Cube? What are the challenges within the events industry? One of the things that happens to me, I'm also the vice president of the Royal Chartered Institution of Occupational Health and Safety. I'm passionate about volunteering. I'm an inveterate volunteer, and I've tried to bring the best bits of what I do with IOSH, and I try to bring that into my work with Cube. We all have to be realistic. There are organizations here today that can afford to spend 100 million. Formula E, their budget is in excess of 5 million a year on ESG and sustainability. There are other organizations within, today at the conference, they can't spend that kind of money, but they're going to be under the same pressures as the rest of us to deliver. So sustainability, ESG, standards, 2012-1, other standards, 2012-1 isn't the only standard. We are going to be required to evidence that we are, if we're not compliant with those standards, that we're at least working towards those standards. With that goes cost. Cost will have a huge impact immediately on the smaller events. It will push ticket prices up. We've already talked about ticket prices already going up. It might put some smaller business out of, might put them out of business if we don't consider how we deliver ESG across the whole of the events industry, not just in the top 10% who have deep pockets. The other thing I do want to share with you is that until we decide as an industry what good looks like in ESG and sustainability, we'll stay in this confused state that we find ourselves in. And again, I'm very aware that the CEO of our business is sat over to my left. One of the things that I did when I joined Cube, I put their whole sustainability program on hold. I needed to understand what their aims were, what they were hoping to achieve, and we've had a reset. And we now call our new program, which I've shared with you, we call it a manifesto. And we've engaged with all of our workforce, all of our supply chain, and we've now developed something that we believe we can deliver. Just 10 simple things.
Excellent. No, thank you, Richard. And we'll come back to some of those things and maybe unpick them a little as well. So, I mean, a huge challenge then is obviously budget around being sustainable, and we'll perhaps come on to how you offset that budget against some benefits. Again, forgive the terrible pun. But sticking with finances and offsetting, I guess we've all come across websites or opportunities to plant a few trees and make ourselves feel slightly better, perhaps offsetting our travel carbon footprint. You guys, however, appear to be talking about something, much more holistic as an approach. Pippa, if I could come to you on that maybe. How can you sort of sum that up, or bring that holistic approach about as an organisation?
Yeah. I think the most important first step for any organisation is data, and one of the key offerings that we bring to the table for our clients is that we measure the entire footprint, whether that's event-related travel. We also bring in everything to do with events around the wastage and all the rest of that. It's quite complex when you get to events rather than standard travel, which we also do, but that's much simpler to gather because it's flights and rail and things like that. But events, obviously, you've got the waste management, you've got the energy suppliers, and. But there are ways of capturing that, and there are some very clever organizations out there that have calculators. Basically, we pump that data through and we get the calculation back. So having that measure and that data in the hand is when we then sit with clients and we actively talk to them about reducing that carbon footprint. The nice thing about events, let's say maybe compared to some other types of travel-related things, is if you're doing the preliminary stages of planning, you can map out what that CO2 footprint looks like, and then you can reassess. Does something need to change about the location? What changes are possible? Could it be the F&B that is completely off because it's all buffets or something like that? You know, where's the wastage coming from? And then you can look to address it. We do the same as well after the event. That footprint can be assessed for the next time round. It's not always possible to make all those changes ahead of. And then, yes, we offer we've got 11 projects very carefully sourced with very carefully chosen providers, nature-based solutions all around the world. And they are all programs that, although they're nature-based, they all have a social development goal as well, and multiple of those. They fulfill the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals in various ways. And I think they're all certified and verified. And I think that's the thing. There's a lot of tree planting going on that may be, sadly, for nothing. It has to be done as part of a proper project with the right scope, independent monitoring, and all the rest of it. Otherwise, it's greenwashing.
It was fascinating to hear one of the presentations on the back of the Commonwealth Games talk about their carbon neutral legacy, and they majored on the word legacy because I know a forest's worth of trees will be planted, but of course those trees are going to take 30 years or so to actually sequester carbon from the atmosphere. So sort of staying with that assessment theme, maybe Graham, in terms of the legacy that behaviour, I guess, that we're trying to bring about, what's Sunbelt doing in this area to make things last longer?
I think mirroring what Pippa said there, that the measurement is one of the key things. As an organisation, of course, and when you think about sustainability, it's far more than planting trees, right? But in the right environments, that is valuable. I think from the perspective of where we sit, we did come up with a 2030 sustainability plan, and that actually is a 10-year plan, start 2020 through to 2030, and that actually gives us as an organisation some committed reduction targets around carbon intensity, and we're on track to deliver against that, which is a 15% reduction by 2024. This is the group business internationally, and actually to deliver 35% reduction by 2030. Here in the UK, we believe we will surpass that. And I think outside of that, when we think about our ESG and certainly the social aspects, and we think about legacy, we've got two strands that I kind of briefly touched upon prior, which one was around about how we look at the social for our own employees, but externally, we have teams of ambassadors around sustainability that work out in the communities to either support people that are in a less privileged position than we are. So there's a number of things that we're doing, such as tutor group. That's people or children with literacy problems that we actually run certain campaigns or 30-minute sessions where we're actually helping them increase their literacy by actually reading to them. That's just one example. There are areas we support around, again, maybe less privileged aspects and walks of life around, kids that may have been taken off track for various reasons, whether that's home environments that's disrupted them and they've gone down a path that you probably wouldn't have chosen. But things like weapons down and gloves up, that's a boxing supported project, but there's a lot more around that. That's actually getting them back on track, giving them a new focus.
Was that weapons down, gloves on?
Weapons down, gloves up.
Got it.
Yeah. So I think the aspects around all these pieces, we do have a director of social impact, which is a lady called Jackie Cuthbert, and she's doing some great things around communities. But again, we want to demonstrate across communities that we want to support and give back. Yep. So there is a commitment there from our side to do that. And I think actually Andy Wright, who's our chief executive, is driving this viewpoint. But it's very heartwarming in terms of the direction that we're pushing on. And that's actually, we want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And that's at the core of what we're trying to do.
I mean, thanks for unpicking and opening that up for us. You were talking about the budget involved with that, and I think, those are all absolutely laudable initiatives, of course, and I'm sure we would all want to sort of, be part of such initiatives. Not every organisation has that deep pockets. So Richard, I mean, launching the e-bike series in various cities around the world and such, and I know, thank you for sharing with me the sustainability manifesto that you've put together for Cube. Are you able to sort of pick on those two things and tell us a bit about maybe some of the actionable insights that organisations can do to make an impact today and in the short and medium term?
Absolutely. I'd just like to go back to touch on a couple of points that Pippa and Graham have made. As the smallest, the youngest part of the Cube group, we decided from the outset that we were not going to carbon offset, and we were going to be brutally honest with everybody within our ecosystem, within our supply chain, with our host cities. That will lead on to our engagement with host cities in a second. That doesn't mean that we're not doing good work in the background. When I was with Formula E, DHL Motorsport, their sustainability team worked with us, and the solution we found to reduce the amount of flying of equipment around the world was to actually buy 3 complete sets of equipment, so that that kit was moving around the world in containers, very cleverly managed. But again, you need deep pockets to do that. Each one of those sets was, in the tens of millions of pounds. Cube are a great company. E-Bike Grand Prix is going to be an incredible product. We just don't have that depth of pocket. So what we've done, we've chosen to take a holistic approach. Holistic is a word I use an awful lot, and my colleagues in the room are probably already smiling because I've said the word. But as part of our engagement with host cities, at a contractual level, we're going to ask them to do 2 things, two key deliverables. We want them to evidence to us how they are engaging with the city. They're engaging with micromobility, what they're proposing to do around micromobility, because e-bike Grand Prix is about micromobility. To have open discourse around public transport, what are the benefits, and to provide us with data to evidence that they are actually doing something to further e-bike Grand Prix's aims. The second point goes perhaps more to the legacy, so I have got to the point with legacy. I took part in some incredible projects with Formula E, and I'm going to bring some of those ideas across to e-bike Grand Prix. Working with students, education, culture shift. If you can start speaking to a young person early enough and engage with them and change their viewpoint, I very often find out that if it might be the demographic within the family has changed, the approach. It's quite often the children that are changing the parents' attitude. So again, as part of our as part of our project within the delivery of e-bike Grand Prix, we will ask the host cities to evidence what they're doing around legacy, education, and share that with us. And that again will make up a piece of our marketing and our social media. So it is not, we don't have the budget to do some of the incredible things that Graham's doing, but what we will do is that we will, and I guess you could accuse me of, just going after low-hanging fruit, and to some extent, I am, because you have to start somewhere. And at the moment, within the events industry, and I haven't been in the events industry in the UK for a few years. I've been 8 years with Formula E. I've been wandering the planet. We are a little bit lost. NOAA are doing some very good work in this area. I think we need to come together and we need to decide what we are going to do as an events industry. We need to define our targets, set objectives, and work together to deliver them. The companies that have deeper pockets should support the developing companies and new events, because if we don't do this, some of the incredibly exciting events that happen, perhaps maybe 2 or 3 people will put on an event. There's an incredible festival in my village, the Good Life Festival. It's run by 3 people. We need to support that, and again, take a holistic approach to support them, not just from the point of view of carbon neutrality, but actually to put our hands in our pockets and support them financially.
No, it's really interesting to hear about you reaching out to younger generations, and I don't know about and communities. I don't know people in the audience, but it's my kids that are preaching to me. Simple little things like turn the lights off, Dad. Just old habits that die hard, and I think there's a tremendous hope that we've got in the future in the kids and the way they're behaving. I just wanted to quickly ask for a show of hands from the audience, if you don't mind. Who would be able to tell me what Scope 3 emissions are? Could you stick your hand in the air? There's someone there at the back. Thank you very much. Yeah, there's a couple there. So, Scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions are what we will be measured on as businesses moving forward. At a very high level, and there are lots of different descriptions of these, Scope 1 emissions are those that we generate directly from our business activities. Scope 2 is the indirect emissions from our supply chains and such and so forth. And Scope 3 is the associated emissions, the emissions associated with putting on an event, such as the visitor travel. And it's those Scope 3 emissions that actually are responsible in a major event scenario for usually around 70% of the overall event's sort of carbon footprint. With that in mind, and talking about the outreach that you've already sort of discussed to some degree, to what extent should visitors, fans, participants who attend events be involved in your environmental, social and governance policy? Richard?
Yeah, you're going to need to stop me talking.
Sorry.
Yeah, I've been involved in some incredible projects, not just Formula E. I've seen what's happened Formula One are trying to do. But again, just the small event that takes part in my village. It's going to be challenging. I'm not completely convinced that without clarity, I'm not sure how we're going to move forward. Could you come back to me?
Yes.
Because I'd like to draw in something that we discussed earlier on.
Yeah. On the question of audience or participation, as it were.
On participation, it'll come together when I talk about what we plan to do with e-Bike Grand Prix.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can say a little bit on Scope 3.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, sorry, did you have your hand up as well? We find that with Scope 3, it's one of the least understood areas. That's one of the other things. So, because there are so many elements to Scope 3, part of what we're doing is trying to help clients understand, travel is one part of it, but there are many other bits as well. But as you rightly said, that could be a highly contributing factor to their overall Scope 3, or even for some to their Scope 1, 2, and 3. So I do think it's important to engage the audience, fans, and people coming to events so they understand it. And what we keep being told, and I totally understand, is that needs to be visualized.
Yeah.
So a CO2 amount means very little to people, but if you tell them that's worth, you can charge 550 mobile phones for that amount of CO2 or things like that, then it's tangible and people think, oh my goodness.
Yes, and of course when we talk about CO2, we talk about CO2 equivalent, and it's the equivalent to CO2, and we're thinking equivalent to what? But anyway, Graham, please.
I think I'm probably going to repeat what Pippa said, really, and what Richard's going to say. But no, I do think, kind of getting that communication out there on actually, Scope 3. I think what everybody agrees is that Scope 3 is the biggest impactful element, and it's the hardest one to tackle.
Yeah.
And I think actually education around what that means and options around what all that is a key thing to share. And I certainly agree when we talk about, carbon that we've saved. I mean, when we look at some of our clean energy options and, battery storage against running generators, you'll spit out kilograms of carbon you've saved. Well, actually, what does that mean? That was a question that I'd have. So, a small generator might actually save you carbon that's the equivalent of what 75 trees in a year would absorb, for instance. That's more meaningful to people. So I think you need to make it more relevant and understandable.
Awareness and visual comparisons. Richard, shall I come back to you?
Yeah. I'm just fascinated with everything. Some of the things that Graham and Pippa are coming up with are taking me off on tangents. This whole question of power generation, transmission, storage. There's a company I've worked with very closely in the room, Power Logistics, and some of the work they're doing around data acquisition is fascinating. That information can be shared, but it needs to be shared in a way that the general public, our spectators, our guests can see is something they understand and relate to. Some of the projects I've worked on with Formula E, and we're hoping to develop for Cube, running alongside micromobility, there will be education pieces around what power looks like. You know, if I were to say to most people here, you know, you're from the events industry, you understand what 2 megawatts of power looks like. But if we were trying to deliver 2 megawatts of power, I'm not going to put Ian Penniston on the spot, but, you know, how many solar panels would we need to deliver that? We wouldn't have enough fields to do it. So it's about education, and we're working with a company called Legacy Events. So when we deliver an event, we will have education around what carbon looks like, why we're not going to go down the offsetting route, but we'll do simple things like, this is recycling, this is why we recycle, this is the advantage of recycling. And those education projects will lead on to engagement with local higher education projects, and hopefully, if we, you know, specifically in London, we're going to engage with a few, with 2 universities, subject to my colleague Mark Thomas being able to deliver that for us. I know he's sitting over there. So we're taking a different approach. We're taking a holistic approach. It's much simpler, but it's about developing education and understanding and sharing that information with people in a way, bite-sized, if you like, Janet and John.
Sure.
It has to be quantifiable.
No, I think you know, it's a really strong theme that I think's come out of this discussion is the whole education piece around you know, sustainability, and particularly what environmental, social, and corporate governance can mean. So you know, you've all explained a little bit about how you're delivering some of this within your organisations and Pippa externally to organisations. There's clearly costs associated with this, but is the money in them their hills too? Is there any profitability in sustainability for you? Maybe Graham, could I come to you with that high level question?
That's a difficult one, right? It's funny, we did have a bit of a conversation pre this about this subject, so we maybe have slightly different lenses on the approach, but I think when we think about an attraction for investors to invest in a company, you know, they may now expect ESG credentials or a strong agenda around ESG, so I suppose that could drive investment into those organisations. And I think when you think about the global challenges we're under, or the climate challenge we're under, you know, we've all got to get on that bus. And so I think those companies that are really representing and accelerating down that path, I think in itself will actually deliver profitability. I think the angles around customers and solution delivery into events, you know, that the environmental or the challenges this year alone, when you think about fuel, for instance, and you know, escalating fuel costs, you know, with more intelligent power solutions. I appreciate Richard's mentioned some of that as well. You know, we actually have positions where you can actually put a sustainable solution in that now actually doesn't cost you money. And that was always a barrier. That was a barrier to say, you know, why should I use an alternative fuel? Why should I spend money on this? Because they're not actually feeling there's a real benefit on the back of that. But what we tend to find with certain solutions, whether it is, you know, battery technology or whatever it might be, you can model actually, yes, it's going to cost you more rent, but actually your net result is a saving not only in carbon, but in cost. Yeah. It's actually, you've actually got something that actually has cost you less than it cost last year. So I think there are 2 angles, and that was the debate we had before about the lens of solution against the lens looking at the organisation around investment coming in, and actually the companies that hopefully will advance.
No, good. I'm keen to pass the question on. Before I quickly do, I just want to get a handle whether there's any questions from the audience that you're burning to ask. They're a quiet bunch. So we'll come over to yourself, Richard. Profitability and sustainability.
Can I turn it back because I'm from the delivery side, if you like. I think there's realistic savings to potentially be made, but I'd kind of want to push back on you a little bit. Not push back, I sort of carry on this discourse. What we think of sustainability, the people, planet, profit model, that was John Elkington back in the early 90s. John Elkington started talking about people, planet, profit, the triple bottom line, in the late 70s. And he was talking about encompassing environmental concerns of the day within a financial model. So in the earliest days of what we now consider to be sustainability, John Elkington, the guy who is now considered the father of sustainability, was talking about sustainability within a financial model. So this is something that we shouldn't be frightened of talking about. In my previous career with Formula E, I was part of conversations around ethical financing, and certainly, when you're talking about loans of multiple millions of pounds, unless you had the credentials to support ESG and really, really solid sustainability credentials, a lot of the banks wouldn't look at you. And that also falls into something that Pippa mentioned early. Ethical finance falls within the UN Global Compact, within those 17 targets. With the 17 targets split down into, I think, 172 deliverables within those targets. And in that, we shouldn't be frightened to talk about finance. So I can't necessarily say that good sustainability could be profitable, but I can certainly see that there are realistic savings to be made through having, ethical financing.
I see. Yeah, no, I think it's the savings. I thought you were erring towards, don't be sustainable, don't be in business, and maybe that's sort of where we're heading. Is there anything beyond that, Pippa? Is it an essential hygiene factor to be in business, or do you see a revenue line associated with it?
I think you have to be careful with a revenue line, because for us as a supplier, we've got to find solutions and work with our clients. Obviously becomes part of the overall scope of service that we offer. So as a single revenue line, I would say no, it works with many other things. So we talked about the data, and we talked about finding solutions and consultancy and all the rest of that. I think the important thing around is there money to be made in, or is there profitability? There is, in the sense of businesses want to survive for the future, and there will be there's not a lot of legal requirement yet, but I'm sure that will grow. They need to be sustainable, and it's not just coming. A lot of our clients that come to us, the reason is they want to be sustainable, and they need those solutions, and they need to be able to show commitment, an absolute commitment, because otherwise their investors won't continue to invest.
I think the investor angle is fascinating, and but equally in terms of the fan or visitor engagement angle, and there are numerous festivals, Shambhala spring to mind, for example, who make a point out of being one of the most sustainable festivals, and that's the reason you choose to maybe go and buy into that brand or go to that festival over another. I guess that's what I'm getting at with.
Yeah, we work, for instance, with the Ocean Race, the most sustainable event on the planet, and and they have very clear criteria who every single supplier across their whole supply chain needs to be, and what they need to fulfill. So I think it becomes part of the value chain if you want to work with these organizations.
Sure.
Yeah.
I've got more questions. I've got another one for you, Richard, but I think we're just about at time. So with that, I think I'll say thank you very much, panelists, and thank you